that blazing overture to the opera Benvenuto Cellini by Hector Berlioz is unmistakably music of the Romantic era, the heroic age, by a man whom many consider to be the father of the modern orchestra, whose organization and power reveal a new vision of society. There occurred during the Romantic age that profound shift from the worship of God to the worship of man, and by the same token, from the fear of God to the fear of man. The implications of this shift unfolded and flowered during the 19th century, when, as had once been the case in ancient Greece, the artist, the poet, the philosopher resumed their role at the center of things. This is Niccolò Paganini, the first star performer of the Romantic age. He was born in 1805 in Genoa. The Romantic hero was as much a revolt against the growing mechanization of life as, in Paganini's case, an actual expression of it. Able to travel more freely than his predecessors and with an extraordinary flair for promotion, it was not only his incomparable mastery of his violin, on which he made pyrotechnical feats of such virtuosity that every violinist since has secretly bewailed the necessity to emulate, but also his extraordinary demonic appearance that enhanced this. Small wonder that his audiences trembled before this tall, spare, black-clad figure with a great beak of a nose set between piercing black eyes. Small wonder women shrieked and swooned, deliciously convinced that he must be in direct league with the devil. This sad portrait, painted in London in 1838, shows him at 56, a short 2 years before his death. Paganini developed the art of violin playing to a very great height. He used naturally the experience that had been already accumulated, but he multiplied it and invented all kinds of things. Thus, double harmonics, for instance. The harmonic, the artificial harmonic, is made by shortening the string with one finger and subdividing it, placing another finger lightly at a certain distance. Double harmonics are simply doing the same on two strings, using two fingers to shorten the strings and two to subdivide them. I will give you an example. Paganini was also a very great guitarist, and he often combined the techniques of both instruments in the one left hand by plucking with some fingers the harmony and fingering with others the melody, and sometimes the reverse, as in this example from the theme of Nel cor più non mi sento. Another one of his brilliant techniques was bouncing the bow off 4 strings, as in the very first caprice. His 24 caprices for solo violin are comparable in range and difficulty to the Etudes of Chopin for piano. The last caprice, the 24th, is probably the best known. Romantic music is still the music most often performed in our concert halls. Its appeal, indeed the appeal of all music, lies partly in the way we perceive it, how we sort it out in our brain. Without meaning to reduce music to a scientific equation, we do know today that the right half of the brain controls the left side of the body, and the left half of the brain controls the right side of the body. Furthermore, we find that the two halves of the brain play different roles in relation to music. Of vital interest is that pitch, melody, and rhythm are registered first in the right half. That is also the seat of our emotional life. The left half comes into play to serve the functions of decoding and analysis. It is the seat of mathematics and science, as well as language and meaning. To make this clearer, let's sing a simple popular tune. If you could put to sleep the left side of the brain, to your dismay you would discover you could sing the tune but not the words. In fact, you couldn't speak at all. Then, if you immobilized the right half instead, you could speak the words, but you would be entirely unable to sing the tune. It would come out a monotone. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. The fulfillment comes only when right and left are combined in cooperation with each other. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. This interplay of right and left belongs very specially to the bowed instruments. In all the others, either both hands are used in the same way as on the piano, or one is used merely to support the instrument. The unconscious yet perfect coordination of the right and left could not be better illustrated than in the totally spontaneous music of the Hungarian gypsy. Here is a master of that great tradition, Lajos Boros, whom I had the immense pleasure of hearing in Budapest. He told me he was the 7th generation in his family of sons who had learned the violin from their fathers. Their music has been handed down for generations. I played a theme by Brahms, and then Boros played the same melody as it had come to him from his ancestors. Such playing lies in the violinist's very bloodstream. No outsider could hope to grasp it. Johannes Brahms was the fruition of the late Romantic age, as Mozart was the peak of the earlier classical era. Both composers drew inspiration of a high nature from that unique city, Vienna, where Brahms was to spend his last 20 years. There is no better place to feel the irrepressible gaiety that is Vienna than here in Grinzing, on her outskirts. The folk music of Austria is spontaneous, full of boundless gaiety, springing like a good crop from rich soil. It could furnish Brahms with dances and concerti, Schubert with Ländler and songs, and Johann Strauss, father and son, with inimitable waltzes. Even in the unique garden music of Schrammel, there is that special taste, as native to Grinzing as the Heuriger, that heady young wine served here so abundantly. In this musical tradition of Johann Schrammel, we have a halfway house between the improvised rural folk music, always played by ear, and the domesticated urban concert music of set written pieces. Schrammel and Strauss were contemporaries. This village of Grinzing was the rustic realm of Schrammel, as it remains to this day. In this engaging music, we hear the spirit which continued over 2 centuries to inspire the great composers of Vienna. People will always respond to the exuberance, the gaiety, the tenderness of this music. Most composers in the Romantic age, there was still no arbitrary class distinction between popular and classical music. The great North German composer Brahms knew that folk music belonged organically to the whole of music, drawing upon it for his symphonies. It took Brahms some time to find the courage to present a symphony at all. Such was the shadow of Beethoven. Brahms was past 40 when at last he felt free to release his first symphony, which had been ripening for 20 years. He was so pleased by the triumphant result that he finished his second symphony within a year. It is the finale to that work which you are hearing now. As the cities of Europe expanded, so the mass of people demanded cohesion, purpose, and leadership. The modern symphony orchestra is a microcosm of that evolution. It assembles a powerful but unformed mass of every kind of sound and noise, demanding to be given shape, texture, and creative purpose. The symphony orchestra had grown along with the cities, competing in volume with the ever stronger noise of daily life. By the 1830s, the railroad rattled through the once quiet countryside. Soon steamships would whistle in the harbor, telegraph wires would hum, and factories would clatter. The long and noble peasant tradition was losing out to urban culture. Large was beautiful, loud was splendid. What could be more natural to the industrial age than the piano? A solid piece of furniture offering a large row of ivories like a bared denture. The pianos which now appeared on the market made those of Mozart and Beethoven's day seem like pale lightweights. The piano became the heroic voice of the concert virtuoso, usurping the role of the voice and the violin. When the piano's language is spoken with skill and comprehension, we accept the inevitable limitations of a mechanical instrument. The composer who transfigured the technique of piano music into a romantic expression was Frédéric Chopin. His genius and lyrical style bridged the gap between the older instruments and the newer monsters, but it was that fiery champion of the keyboard, Franz Liszt, who made full use of the new heavy artillery. Liszt embellished his formidable piano compositions with coloratura effects as astounding as those of any diva. Here was the pianist counterpart of Paganini, a cult figure worshipped and admired in all the great capitals of Europe. Liszt became one of the first uncrowned emperors of music. Louis Lorty plays for us Liszt's La Leggerezza. Franz Liszt, born a year after Chopin on the border of Austria, lived to see his corner of disputed Germanic territory gathered within the newly created Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1867, a date marking as well the Confederation of Canada. We think of Beethoven as German, of Schubert as Austrian, and Paganini as Italian. Yet in their day, those nations did not exist as such. These composers each belonged to a separate region, a cultural entity, which had not yet joined with others to become one country, unlike France. Neither Louis XIV nor Napoleon could have achieved what they did without a united country behind them. And in many ways, France set the example for Europe. That spirit remains alive today when Frenchmen gather on a gray day in a small village to await the arrival of the famed Batterie Fanfare de la Garde Républicaine. The music expresses the pride and honor of a people who had so recently established a militant democracy. Music has always been asked to play its part in expressing our identity, and now a new form emerged, the national anthem. The Marseillaise was born of the Great Revolution of 1789, and by 1794 was known all over France, although it was not officially accepted as the national anthem until 1857. Written in 2/4 time, it serves admirably as a march. Was it not Napoleon who once said, "One good march is worth 100 cannon"? But as militarism has rather lost public favor, it is now played more slowly, conveying greater majesty and dignity. Now every land was expected to have its own hymn of self-praise, but we might do well to reflect on the words of La Marseillaise. Citizens, to arms, tighten your ranks. Let us march, march, so that impure blood shall water our land. Anthems in 3/4 time, for instance, the Star-Spangled Banner, might serve as waltzes, but cannot serve as marches. One such anthem expresses the pride of England without having to raise its voice. God Save the Queen is as much a prayer as it is a national statement, upholding the long tradition of the monarchy which it so deeply respects. I've often pondered about this concept of separate nation states, and I'm not at all sure that ultimately the nation state is the best solution for the many families of mankind. During the Middle Ages, boundaries were much looser, and people moved across them easily, whilst holding fast to their native local identity. Now we put up artificial barriers and give people passports or take them away. Europe even imposed this idea of fixed national boundaries on Africa and Latin America, perhaps because the peoples of Europe fought so hard to create their own nation states. In the effort to impress, national anthems have sometimes reached absurdity. The Swiss, however, have a conception all their own. In Switzerland, every one of the cantons has its own national song. This is the anthem of Appenzell, a song that speaks of a quiet pride in mountains and fertile valleys, in peace and independence, in a sense of native worth. Looking back on the 19th century, it would appear to rumble like a volcano in constant eruption. In this turmoil, two nations struggled to be born, Italy and Germany. Typically, Italy found her musical political voice in Giuseppe Verdi, as had no other country. When his opera Nabucco was first performed in 1842 at the Teatro La Scala in Milan, the chorus of the Jews longing for their homeland was seized upon by Italian patriots as a signal to overthrow the hated Habsburg rulers in northern Italy and to unite their country.
Bravo! Bravo! This is the music we Italians have been waiting for. Bravo! Verdi!
Although this is a scene from a feature film on the life of Verdi made in the 1950s style, the audience in 1842, in fact, did come close to storming the stage. Verdi became the hero of the day, his name scrawled over city walls like graffiti, because by a happy chance his name, V-E-R-D-I, stood for Victor Emmanuel, King of Italy.
Are you pleased, Maestro?
Bravo.
2 decades later, Verdi himself joined the new national government as a deputy for Parma.
But this is provocative action. Interrupt the performance and arrest the composer. Correct.
Hooray! Long live Italy! Maestro, once more, all together, come on!
Listen to them. Yes, I hear it.
At this stage in our journey, it should be abundantly clear how inextricably intertwined are music and man, whether for good or ill. While Italy was in revolt, the German people were also clamoring for unification. It was then that Richard Wagner, nationalist in exile, began to write the text for his opera Die Meistersinger. It would be almost 20 long years before he completed the music for it. Born in Leipzig in 1813, Wagner was obsessed with the history of the German race far back into the mists of antiquity. For this opera, he took as his hero the actual historical figure of Hans Sachs, maker of shoes and songs, the master singer. Wagner's hero, Hans Sachs, gave expression to Wagner's own passionate ideology, exhorting the people to remember their duty, to preserve and defend German culture from alien intrusion, whether from within or without. Despite his conservative message, Wagner's undeniable genius as a progressive musician helped to accelerate the transformation of Western classical music. No doubt Wagner secretly saw himself as Hans Sachs, mythically crowned with laurels. The shrine for Wagner lovers is the Festspielhaus in Bayreuth, in northern Bavaria. Wagner himself both planned and supervised its construction. Wagner's achievement lay in his mastery of the elements that were at hand in this emerging Germany, with its wealth of Nordic myths, its philosophers, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, its great literature, and its musical heritage. This house broke with the elegant conventions and traditions of Italian and French theater, so fashionable in these Germanic principalities. It remains a shrine today, as much for the power and strength of Wagner's music as for the deep emotional impact of the ideas expressed. Wagner made unprecedented demands on the size both of the voices and of the orchestra. The design of the Festspielhaus is unique for its huge orchestra pit sunk deep under the stage, entirely separated from the public. Wagner would stand here, towering above his orchestra, only his head and shoulders visible to the singers on stage. The singers say they can feel the great orchestral blasts in their feet when 100 players or more unleash their maximum force. The audience didn't see him at all. He wanted them to concentrate on the drama. It is so ideal as an opera house and so very advanced in concept that it is a mystery to me why newer houses have never copied this perfect design. Could it possibly be that conductors insist on being seen by the audience? The splendid sound of the orchestra mixed with the voices and was projected into the fan-shaped amphitheater. This was indeed a composer's dream come true. From this very place came sounds which changed our music forever. Wagner's greatest life work, upon which he toiled for some 25 years, was his cycle of 4 operas, The Ring of the Nibelung, Das Rheingold, Die Walküre, Siegfried, and Götterdämmerung. It epitomized the state of slightly hysterical fantasy which the Romantic era had reached, taxing the endurance of both the performers and the public. Symbolism of the hero, Siegfried, betrayed and slain, and of the goddess Brünnhilde, who in the end laid down her life for him, was not lost on Germany. In 1883, Wagner died, less than a decade after completing the Ring cycle. His death in Venice seems strange, for the Latin colors and elegant immorality of that city hardly agree with the paranoia and fog-bound myths of the Wagnerian music drama. Wagner's remains were returned in state to Wahnfried, his home in Bayreuth. Like the Festspielhaus, it was paid for by Wagner's enthusiastic, almost mesmerized young patron, King Ludwig II of Bavaria. Not long after, the king himself died under mysterious circumstances. Repercussions of Wagner's music are still strongly felt in our time. What Wagner did to music was fundamental, for ever since Bach and Mozart, the driving motor of Western music had been the idea of a home key. A piece was in E flat or in A, in major or in minor. That key was like the safe harbor to which the music always returned, no matter how far away it might stray. Getting back home after many modulations to remote keys was like Columbus returning home in triumph from San Salvador. Wagner changed all that. He offers no home key. Instead, like the continuous spectrum of colors, an endless thread of melody runs through an endless change of keys, rather like Alice walking through all those mirrors and never turning back. Wagner's influence is apparent in the music of many of his contemporaries. Anton Bruckner, for instance, who was organist here at the magnificent monastery of St. Florian in Austria. Bruckner was Wagner's disciple, but he could not have been more different in nature. He was a simple man of boundless faith, and his 9 long symphonies and many masses have a countrified quality all their own. His works for organ, played at his own keyboard, truly make that noble instrument the anonymous voice of God. Wagner's innovative harmonic style even penetrated to France. One can trace it in the music of César Franck, himself, like Bruckner, an organist. Franck's Sonata for Violin and Piano, composed in 1886, 3 years after Wagner's death, may have a moody chromatic harmony, but it has none of Wagner's bombast. My son Jeremy joins me in playing it. It is the performer's task to bring to life that supreme expression, that synthesis of form and meaning which penetrates to the deepest levels of our awareness. The music becomes, in fact, as much the performer's as the composer's. In the 19th century, these skills combined to produce works which established Western music as one of the greatest achievements of which men are capable. One of the striking musical evolutions of the later 19th century was the emergence of a recognizable national spirit in classical music, drawing upon folk cultures within areas that sometimes were not yet nations. Composers like Dvorak and Smetana for the Czechs, Grieg for Norway, and later Sibelius for Finland, to name but a few, used native melodies and dance rhythms in their work. Nowhere was this national feeling stronger in its musical voice than in Russia, where it could draw upon the many and diverse races which had lived there for so long. It is in the folk dances and songs of people such as these that Tchaikovsky, Mussorgsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, and others found inspiration. The fervent Slavic soul survives in the music of its Christian faith wherever it may be carried. The Eastern Orthodox chant, with its deep male voices, sings of the longing and passion for union with Christ and God. The roots of this faith lie so deep within the character and experience of the people of these vast lands that no regime on earth will ever succeed in suppressing it. The ideal blend of the Russian East and European West is to be found in the music of Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. At the court of the Tsars, there had long been a passion for European elegance, French, Italian, and British. Around 1860, a dancer from Marseille, Marius Petipa, started shaping the great Mariinsky company that was to become the guiding light of the ballet world. For him, Tchaikovsky wrote many scores, of which perhaps the best known is Swan Lake. White Swan Pas de Deux is performed by the outstanding dancers Karen Kane and Frank Augustine at the home of the National Ballet of Canada in Toronto. How well I remember at the age of 5 my first experience of unattainable love. It was engendered by seeing the inimitable Anna Pavlova dancing in San Francisco. She remained my ideal, my Dulcinea, and I dreamed of playing this solo for her. There is only one popular dance form that I feel retains the same elegance and style as the ballet, and that is the Viennese waltz. The music of Johann Strauss and his father continue to hold sway in Vienna as they did for the whole of the 19th century. This music, too, springs from native sources. The waltz has that curious anticipation of the second beat and delay of the third, which lends such charm to playing three-quarter time. The Austro-Hungarian Empire may no longer be, but its flavor and accent remain. The flamenco is the unique musical voice of the Spanish gypsy. It became the national musical symbol of Spain, carrying it to France, Austria, Russia. Indeed, all of Europe became enamored of it. Flamenco emerged from its birthplace in Andalusia in southern Spain, where the Moors had hung on to the last. There the gypsy settled 500 years ago. What is compelling is that although flamenco is a collective art, every performer remains sovereign. The dance for the woman alone, with all its sensuality, accompanied by the guitar, the singer, and the shouts of her companions, is the height of this art. She establishes with defiance her equality to the male. The wild, strong, yet perfectly coordinated music and dance of the flamenco insists, as music must, that we should never stray too far from our roots. Could technological man, alienated from the soil and substituting theories for instincts, ever again create a flamenco? This incredibly vital music reminds us today, as it could have a century ago, of the crucial choice before us, whether to live in confidence or in fear, whether to accept the sacredness of life or succumb to the fear of man.